We are recording. Okay, so I guess I sent this out to everybody yesterday, and if you haven't had a chance to look at it, that's fine. But if you had and got to look over it, it's okay. If you didn't fill it out, it's more just to have look at the things that it's asking you more so than even your responses or what you think your responses are. Those are the things that people who are successful in school do. That you you ask yourself periodically if you're meeting your goals. All these things are different things that are good things for you to do to take ownership of your learning. Um, how many of you people have heard the term metacognition before I mentioned it yesterday? My kids probably have because I'm a dork and I talk about this stuff all the time. So, metacognition is just basically defined as thinking about how you think or thinking about how you learn. And it's a beneficial thing for you guys as students because the more conscious you are about the actual learning process outside of the subject, whether it's math or history or literature or art or whatever it is, the more ownership you take over how you learn, the more successful you are when you're learning in those topics. Let me send a quick text out to one other person who's probably joining. Okay, so just a quick show of hands, or how many of you people think you do some of these things that you saw on that list? You do some of them, Robin? Anyone else? And that's not uncommon. One of the things that in public schooling that they don't teach you is they teach you a lot of subject matter stuff and they provide a lot of support for you to learn that subject matter stuff, but they don't teach you a lot about how you learn. And so that's kind of left for you to figure out. And usually you figure it out because you saw someone else doing something. They're taking notes. Oh, I better take notes. Do I know how to take notes? No, but I'm just writing stuff down and sometimes that works. And that's not an awful strategy. At least you're engaging in the process. But doing so with a little thought is going to be more successful. And so we're going to look at some specific strategies that you can use to accomplish those things. And let me get to the beginning. Now we're at the end. Come on, PowerPoint, behave. Okay, metacognitive strategies. These are things that take the more you understand about how you learn, then you can start to look at these strategies and take ones that make sense for you and mostly that make sense for the kind of learning task that is ahead of you. So, one of the first things you should always do when you start studying or any kind of a learning process, a new chapter in a book or whatever, is to think about what it is you're being asked to do. And hopefully, your professors or your teachers gave you something called learning objectives, which are becoming more common than they used to be, but still not. I wouldn't say you probably have 100% of all your classes that you're going to take are going to have very clearly defined learning objectives. But there are things written in the form of by the end of this chapter, by the end of this module, you will be able to dot, 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 write an essay using APA style, write an essay using MLA style, or whatever it is. And they'll give you specific things you're supposed to do. Look at those tasks and what divides different types of learning tasks or the different verbs they use to describe those learning, whether it's you will write. A writing task is different than studying for a remembering task or a recall task. So finding tasks that line up with the different strategies and then employing a different strategy is how you move from K-12 type learning into more collegiate learning. One of the first tasks, the metacognitive strategies, is self-questioning. And that's something you should always be doing. You should always question your own work. Am I on the right track? Is this answer correct? And don't just ask the question, try to answer it for yourself. So, am I doing this math problem the correct way? I don't know. Let's do some research. Go back to the textbook to make sure you're following the steps the way the textbook said. Or are you writing a history paper? Am I getting my sources correct? Go look through all your sources to make sure you're citing them correctly and all those kinds of things. Keep asking yourself questions. And you should never stop doing that. Never think that you have it exactly right. Always ask yourself, what am I missing? What am I doing? What can I do better? That's probably one of the easier metacognitive strategies. And kind of the opposite of that one is meditation. You get so caught up in doing, like, reading the chapter, reading your notes, taking, doing homework problems and all these things. You need to take a little break. And usually my rule of thumb is never do more than 2 hours of straight studying without at least a 10 or 15-minute break where you just turn your brain off for a second. And that helps all that stuff that you just learned kind of sink into your memory. And the first thing I would do in any of these kind of meditative strategies is try to make your head completely blank. Don't think about the stuff you just did. Don't think about problems in life. Don't try not to think about anything. Think about maybe a dot of light and try to focus on that for just a second, and then start to think about the topic. Are you studying math? Yeah, start thinking about math, and then start thinking about the actual class. Is it a pre-calc class or a calculus class or whatever the class is, a statistics class, or whatever you're taking? You start thinking about the topic that you're taking, and then slowly go back to where you are studying wise. You can kind of think through all the processes that you've done to get to the chapter or whatever the thing you're working on then. And when you get back to that, then you kind of completed that thought process. Now you've had your little break. Now it's time to move on. Does that kind of make sense? Do you see how that will help you let all that stuff sit? And part of the problem with a lot of learning is, especially when you're doing learning from textbook videos or you're just burning through chapter reading and things like that, is you tend to not to stop and you're just trying to get through all the things you've been asked to get through without stopping to think about what you're being asked to learn by getting through that stuff. So take those little breaks. Like I said, 2 hours is a good amount. If you find you burn out after 1 hour, that, everyone has a different level before they lose attention and before they start getting the results that they want to get from the studying that they're doing. So meditation is a good thing. Take a walk. If that helps clear your head, take a walk. That's what I usually do here at my office. It's a half-mile walk to the library, half-mile walk or to the business college, and a half-mile walk back. That takes about 20 minutes, and that's a perfect amount of time for me to clear my head and get back to work. So that I highly recommend doing that. The other thing that you probably don't do a lot, most people don't do a lot, certainly at the younger age, is is reflection. And while a lot of these, they're not specific study tasks, um, reflecting is pausing to think about the task that you're doing. And it's usually a cyclical process. You think of ways to where you're at, ways to improve, and then reflect on that, and then rinse and repeat. And reflection is only really metacognitive if you're consciously reflecting on what your thought processes are and what you can do to improve them next time. So that's kind of similar to meditation. It's a similar practice. So those kind of two are kind of tied together. Writing reflective journals is a great way to engage in this metacognitive strategy. And it's a great thing to do in any class, especially in a class that's very core to your program of study and stuff that you're going to wind up having to know for the rest of your life. Keep a reflection journal on that class. Today we did this. It doesn't have to be very long, just a paragraph about what you did every day in that class, and then reread over it. And what happens in your brain is as you're rereading that little paragraph, you start to reflect on all the things that happened in that class and you start to remember them. And your brain creates memories, and your ability to work and interact and use those memories, the more you do it, the stronger those memories get. Basically, what happens with a memory is that there's a little bit of information in your brain stored in one spot of your brain, and then there's a place in your brain where that information can be made meaningful to you, and they have to make a connection. If you have all these little isolated bits of memories in your head, they're not really that good for much of anything because you don't know how to work with them and you don't know how to recall them when you need them. So the more you connect that bit of information to something meaningful to you, the more you'll remember it, and you build a little neural pathway. And the more you think about that, the stronger that neural pathway gets. And if it's something really important, you need to build a neural superhighway between that kind of information and the part of your brain that reasons with that information so that you can work in that field. And that's what you're doing using these metacognitive strategies. Another one is being aware of what you're good at and what you're less good at. We all have things that we're better at than others. And for the most part, it's not because you're not good at those things. It's because you've not worked in those areas in a meaningful way and in an engaged way so that you learned it when you learned it when you were taught it the first time. It's like people say, I'm not good at math, and I'm first one to say that I'm not good at math. But what I was not good at doing math homework. And if I'd been better at doing math homework, I'd be a lot better at doing math right now, but I was really horrid at that. So I never really picked up good math skills. But being aware of those things will help you leverage the things that you're really good at. If you're really good at reading comprehension, use that. Even if you're in a math class, there's a certain component of that that's reading comprehension, that you need to read things to understand what the processes are. Then there's the calculation part. But if you're really good at that reading comprehension part, slay that part and then get help with the rest. And if any of you wind up in the business world, you will hear something during your life as a business person called a SWOT analysis. It's SWOT, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And those what people do when they have a problem in front of them or they're working with a team. What are my team strengths? What are my personal strengths as a student? I'm highly organized. I show up on class on time. I'm this. What are my weaknesses? My grammar is horrible. I can't spell. Things like that. What are my opportunities? Well, since I'm very good at organizing myself, I'm probably pretty good at organizing, getting tutoring help for the things I'm less good at. So you leverage the strengths as an opportunity to address your weaknesses. And then the things that you don't know how to deal with are your threats, and then you work on mediating those. Okay. This is one, especially for those of you who are going to be in the teaching profession, that are super powerful devices to help you remember things. This isn't a remembering task when you're memorizing stuff. And mnemonic devices are little strategies that you use to improve retention using rhymes and patterns and associations to remember them. I guarantee everyone in this Zoom has had at least one classic mnemonic device thrust upon you as your children. Does anyone remember the ABC song? I bet all of you remember the ABC song. That is a mnemonic device. They use this little sing-songy thing to teach you the order of the letters in the alphabet. And to this day, when I'm alphabetizing something, right, JKLMNOP. And the reason you remember that is because you were taught that silly song when you were a kid, and that silly song taught you the order of the letters, and you'll never forget them. And there's a few of you here who read music. What's the common mnemonic device they give to all students who are beginning to read music. I'm guessing Maggie, Barrett, and Robin can probably tell me what this one is at least, and probably maybe all of you. What's a mnemonic device for remembering the lines on a staff of music?
Be solfege.
What's that? I'm sorry,
Solfege.
didn't. I'm sorry, cut out again. Sorry.
Solfege.
What's that one?
It's the notes, just like generalized, like do, re, mi,
Oh,
fa, sol, la,
gotcha.
ti, do.
Gotcha. And it's the every good boy does fine and AC FACE on the treble clef and good boys do fine always and all cows eat grass or however you remember those. Those little mnemonic devices stick with you forever. My music theory teacher in high school was all fired up about the circle of thirds, which is a great way to remember the 1 3 5 of any note. And to this day, I can remember C E G G B D D F A A C E E G B B D F F A C because I was sat in front of a class and had to recite that multiple times that year. And I'll never forget that, which means I also never forget the 1 3 5 7 9 11 13 15 of any chord because I can use that counting wheel to do that. And those things, what mnemonic devices are great at is when you have a task that requires you to rapidly remember anything. There are great ways to do that. Who remembers the one for remembering the colors of the rainbow? Roy G. Biv. And those kinds of things are when you're giving a memorization task, like if you're in a history class, the order of British kings or something silly like that that you have to memorize. Or for Maggie, you are going to be doing anatomy and physiology, which is a huge 2 course sequence, pretty much all in memorization tasks. And the more of those little mnemonic devices you can use to help you remember those, the longer you'll remember them. And then when you're in practice, those things tend to be things you don't forget. Memorize the bones in the hand. There you can come up with a mnemonic device. And for any of those things. And just a little trick to help you remember them. If you can sneak a dirty word into that mnemonic device, I will guarantee you'll remember it. So that's mnemonic devices. Um, and I'll share, if you guys want, I'll share this PowerPoint presentation with you. I've got all my notes. So if you want to read on these individual strategies, you're obviously not going to have enough time to deploy any of them while we're speaking. But I will share this in the chat when we're done. Um, Writing down your working is another super important one. Um, It involves recording each step of your thought process while solving a problem or completing a task. What it does is it helps you externalize your thinking and it makes it easier to monitor and evaluate and adjust your approaches to things. Um, it could be as simple as writing down, all the steps in a math problem, or it could be writing down if you're say you're taking a history class, writing down the cause of whatever situation you're learning, whether it's a war or a depression or all those things. To start writing those down, write them in the margins of your notes, write them in your textbook. And akin to that is thinking aloud. This is a weird one to do if you're in a room with your roommates because you're sitting there yapping to yourself and it looks strange. But verbalizing things out loud is a great way to and that's one of those things that increases that neural connection between memories and the working parts of your brain that the more you think out loud and thinking these thoughts, you're verbalizing it, and that creates another little pathway. Every time you do those things, it creates a little pathway. And the stronger that gets, the smarter you be. Um, like I said, this one is a little weird to do if you're not alone, but if you're reading a passage, just say to yourself, okay, the author was describing the main character's emotions here. She's nervous because of whatever is going on. And oh, and that line about her hand shaking supports that thought. Things like that. For a math problem, first you need to figure out what question is being asked. Okay, it's how many apples are left. Okay, and now I'm calculating for apples. There are 7, there are now 20. There are 20, there are now 7 were eaten, blah, blah, blah. And then you have to figure out all those steps. When you're writing an essay, I want this paragraph to explain the changes in climate, how changes in climate affect agriculture. Write that out. Start with the topic sentence. I want to start with the topic sentence. Then give an example, maybe on droughts. Then I'll explain how that impacts crop yields. And then you start building things like that. And you build a more structured, organized essay by doing things like that. One that really saved me in grad school when I was writing my master's thesis are graphic organizers. Graphic organizers are color coding things or adding pictures to your notes or things where you start categorizing things using different graphic sequences or different graphic ideas. I color coded all my notes. I was writing a master's thesis on a coal miner rebellion. I had 2 coal mining unions that I was working with, one in Ohio and one in West Virginia. So I color coded all the ones in West Virginia purple and the Ohio ones blue. Then I went, here's, governmental actions are all done in yellow and things like that. So you have all your notes organized. And when you need to go to make a point, it makes it a whole lot easier to go back and find those things. 100% of you, when you're in college, are going to write a research paper at some time. And using these things for that are great ideas. Using them in class when you're taking notes, if you use stickers, is a great way. If you have just a sticker book of stickers that for different topics, when you're writing on a certain type of topic, drop a sticker in your notes. And that way, when you open your notes again, not only does it alert you to what kind of thing you're doing, but it tells your brain, okay, I'm preparing to do this, which starts your brain working in that field. And you start thinking about that topic again. And it makes remembering and working with that information a million times easier. And I have some examples in my PowerPoint that you guys can look through when I send that to you, because we're running a little bit short on time. And the library is about to close, and I don't want to have to deal with the police when they lock my building and I set off the alarm. Regulation checklists are another one. Making checklists. If you're a good lister, which I am the world's worst lister, so this is not a strategy that I've ever been any good at because I'm not good at listing in general. But if you can write out a checklist of the things you have to do for each thing, like if for your math problems of regulation checklist, number 1, I read the problem carefully. Most people fail on math problems because they didn't read the problem thoroughly and they're not answering the question that's really being asked. And then I identified what is being asked. What is the variable? What is the thing that you need to calculate for? Then I wrote down all the known information. So write down all the things you know about that thing. And I chose the correct formula or strategy to answer that. And then at the end, I checked my answer for accuracy. Going through every problem you do with a checklist like that, first of all, make sure you get most of those right. You'll have a lot better accuracy when you're doing something like this. But then your brain just starts getting used to doing all these things every time you do it. So you've developed a good habit. And when you do these things and you have success at them, you know what happens in your brain? It releases a hormone that makes you feel good. And the more times you do those things, the better you feel. And the more times you do those, your body says, I want to feel that way again. So you develop good habits. And another super important one that we tend not to do is active reading, which active reading is when you're like reading a textbook or an article or whatever it is you're being asked to read. Do you just read over it and hope you remember it all? Or do you read over it with a purpose? Obviously, underlining and highlighting text is one that people use a lot. and abuse a lot. And if you're ever seen someone who just basically highlights the whole chapter, that's not very useful because highlighting everything is the same as highlighting nothing. But if you use, you know, some thought behind it and start highlighting and underlining things that actually are important to the topic. Um, Also, especially with me, I'm a little dyslexic, and my dyslexia is a lot of line jumping. Using a ruler or a business card to under the text as you're reading to keep you focused on that line and not get distracted. One thing textbooks do is they put all these little bubble paragraphs and graphics and charts and things in the middle of a page or a paragraph that are really distracting, and everything you can to avoid getting sucked into those distractions will be better for you. Then you scan for main ideas. You scan for main ideas and then summarize them. Write down every time when you're reading a page, if you've read a complete section of a textbook or something, write down a summary of it. That is probably almost as much note taking as you almost need to do with anything reading, because you can always refer back to the text. If you have a good summary, you know where the chapter is and you know what you thought was going on, then you can go back and read and pull out facts out of the textbook. And that's a great way to not only to use this strategy, but that's another one of those things that builds those neural pathways, superhighways to from your memories to the working centers of your brain. And some of the last two, active listening. Active listening is a great thing to engage in, which is basically when someone is speaking, like you're being lectured to, or you're in a conversation with somebody. A lot of people are in a conversation are not thinking about what that person is saying. They're more thinking about what they're going to say next. So if you can force yourself not to do that and actually listen to what the person is saying, and then before you say anything, you repeat back to them what you understood they say. And if you're in class and you're being lectured to and you don't understand something, you raise your hand. Excuse me, professor, I understood you were saying this. Is this correct or am I off target here? And that way you show that number one, you were listening to what they were saying. And number two, you gave some idea of where your thinking was in that process. And the professor can say, you're pretty close there, or you're dead on, or you're off target here. So here's where we're going to go to get you back on target. Does that kind of make sense? And the final one is planning ahead. Planning ahead is another one that I'm terrible at. I'm a do things in the moment kind of person, and planning is something I've always resisted. But when I do a good job of planning my tasks, they're a lot more successful. Um, that's thinking about the things you're going to do and the order you're going to do them. Let's say I have a research paper. Okay, where am I going to start? Well, I need a thesis. So you start thinking about what the paper is going to be about. You might need to do a little research on the topic before you can even make those calls on what you want to write on. So planning is the final one we're going to talk about. And most of all, planning is a proactive approach. And too often in teaching and learning, or certainly in learning, that we tend to be passive about how we learn. And I can 100% guarantee you the person that does the work is the one that's doing the learning. If you're engaged in passive lectures your whole academic career, that professor who had to write those lectures and plan those lectures probably learned a lot from that process. You probably learned a whole lot less. You can still learn that way, but that's the most passive way you can learn next to watching videos, and usually it's not super successful. So planning ahead, always a good idea. So, oh, here we have some chat stuff. Oh yeah, we got all of the mnemonic devices everyone uses. Those are all awesome ones. So does anyone have any questions? Oh yeah, I'm going to share my PowerPoint if anyone wants. a copy of that for to read over later. I've got all the stuff in the notes that should be helpful.